Hello everyone. On this video, I'm going to be showing you how to do entity framework CRUD operations, which is update, delete, and insert. And also I'm going to be showing you how to do joins, right? If you needed to join two tables in order to get different results. So I'm going to be using SQL Server, Microsoft Visual Studio, C Sharp, and ASP.NET Web API. So let's get started. So from our last code first tutorial, entity code first tutorial, I already had set up a entity, framework on my system, so everything's up and running. So I'm going to show you the database a little bit because for this example, I just want to show you what I got already. I'm just going to show you how everything works. Okay, so I got a user table with some users. So I got three users: Mac, John, and Mary. They all have their properties. I have a permission table, which is the type of user each one of these. So one of the users is going to be an admin, and two users are going to be just basic users. And the user permission, it's the linkage between the permission to the user table. So as you guys can see here, I have three users set up. So the basic operation we're going to do here today is going to be to query this data from the database isEntity. If you guys haven't watched the previous videos, I have two videos. One is code first entity, and the second video is database first. So you guys can use either both of these videos to follow along on this, or if you guys just want to know how to do the CRUD operations, let's go ahead and keep on going. So I'm going to go ahead and run my web API here. I don't have any UI for it. All right. So just so you guys see that there's data on my objects here. So I'm querying the users. If you guys can see here, I got three users. So I got Mac, I got John, and I got Mary. I got their permissions. So it's three different permissions. Each one of them have permissions. There's an ID, a permission ID, a user, and a user ID. And there's the permissions, the permission table. And we got admin, and also we got user. So as you guys can see here, we got data. Let's go ahead and continue. It doesn't really matter what we're gonna do. So all these examples are gonna be behind the scenes in the back end. I'm not gonna show anything on the front end, at least not on this tutorial. I just wanted you guys to kind of understand a little bit what works behind it before we can show anything on the front end. Our very first thing we're gonna do is add a user to the table. So in order to add, you just create user, new, and then we're gonna give it an age. So age is going to be 10. Date create is gonna be now, datetime.now. Email, it's gonna be, let's put the name first because that way we know what it. First name, it's gonna be Richard. Last name is going to be Joe. Doesn't really matter. Email is going to be rjoe@gmail.com. Right? We got the user set up. Now we're going to add the user to the database. So we're going to, the data context is already declared up on top here. And that's how we're pulling all these lists, all this data from the database. So in order to add a user, you're just going to do data context.users.add, and we're going to add user, which is going to be this newly created user, and we're going to do data context.save changes. With this, we're going to create a user. We're going to add Richard Joe to the database. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to put a breakpoint here. All right, so once it starts, it's going to hit that breakpoint. We're going to add the user to the database. So the user, it is in the database. Let's go ahead and query the database just to make sure it's there. Select, and you guys see here, there's Richard Joe. So the next item we're going to do, which is we're going to grab from the database Richard's Joe ID in order to add a permission to Richard. All right, so let's take this out. So this is add to database. Now we're going to query Richard, get Richard from database. So in order to get Richard from database, we're going to do user data contacts dot users dot where email equals, and we can grab the email here, and we want the very first record that's going to be Richard. If there's not a user with that record, the user is going to be null. We basically going to the database and grabbing the user that has an email ID, an email equals this. And then we want the very first record or a null. So if user not a null, right? We want to make sure it's not null in order to update it. We are going to set the permission. So in order to do that, we're going to create a new permission. No, not a permission. We're going to create a new user permission. User permission. Now we're going to give a permission ID, which if you look at the table here, permission ID, we can go to permission, select permission ID user, it's 2. And the user ID, it's going to be user.id. So we're getting the permission based on this user here, okay? And then the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do the same thing, data context dot user permissions dot add dot user permission. And we're gonna do data context dot save changes. All right. Let's give it a second. Oh, so that's all done. All right, I'm gonna run my code now. I'm gonna stop because it was running already. Run it. So I'm going this line here, which is data context a user, and I'm putting a query here. It's pulling Richard off the database. Let's see, and looks like we got a user. And yes, it pulled Richard. Now we're creating the permission. We're setting up the permission. So now the user permission is going to have a permission ID of 2 and user ID of 5, which belongs to Richard. Let's go ahead and save it and add, and let's go into the database, make sure it's there. So let's do a select to user permissions. You guys can see here, user ID 5, permission ID 2. All right, let's see what this looks like. I'm gonna comment this out. Let's see what it looks like here. Let's run it again. So now I'm pulling all users from the database. As we can see, Richard is here. Richard is the last one. And now the user permissions, we're gonna see Richard. So user permissions, if I go to the last one, you see how I'm pulling permission ID number 2 and user ID 5. And if there's a drop down here for user, and you see Richard, it's in here. So yeah, so our very first CRUD operation was to add. So we're good to go here. All right, so the next one, our next CRUD operation, it's going to be, we are going to update Richard. Update Richard. How do we do this? All right, first we got to go into the database and grab Richard. Make sure if Richard is not null, right? Because we're going to make sure that he's not null, right? All right, let's say we want to change Richard's last name. So what we do here is we do user dot last name equals, we're going to change Richard's last name to Richard Bowie, or doesn't matter. So the next thing we're going to have to do is data context dot entry, and we're going to pass in the user, that is Richard, dot state, it's going to be entity state dot update dot modified. And next thing we're going to do is what we've been doing the whole time, save changes. And then save it. Let's go ahead and run it. I'm pulling Richard from the database. I'm getting Richard. So Richard, it's not null. User, it's not null. Changing Richard's last name to Bowie. So as you can see here, last name got changed on the object. Now I'm setting the state of the user to modified and then saving it to the database. All right, let's go ahead and continue. Let's go into our database, go to user, select, and as you guys can see here, Richard got a different last name now. So, all right, CRUD operation number 2, we are done here. Let's move to the next one. So we did an add, an update. Now the delete, it's gonna be pretty similar. I'm just gonna copy and paste this. So delete, we're gonna delete Richard. We don't have to update his name. We're gonna delete Richard. So we don't have to update Richard's last name on this. So all we need to do here is instead of having modify, we're gonna have delete and then save it. Let's go ahead and run it. So it looks like I found Richard. Modify Richard and save changes. All right. So this is great that we see this. So the problem with this is there's a relationship, there's a key relationship to the user permission table. So what I need to do is in order to delete Richard, we need to delete the relationship first. Okay, so let's go ahead and cancel it. So we're gonna do data contacts dot entry. Oh, actually, no, I got Richard. So now I need to get the user permission, Richard's user permission, which is going to be data contacts dot user permissions dot where lambda user ID equals user.id. I gotta match the user permission, user ID with Richard's permission. And I want the very first one, first or default. And then we're gonna do the same thing for the permission. We're gonna make the changes first for the permissions, then we're gonna make the change for the user. So this is delete permission, delete permission, and then here is gonna be delete user. All right, let's see what happens. Permissions, so users, I got Richard. Let me see if I can find a permission for Richard. I found Richard's permission. It's right here for Richard. I'm gonna set the permission to delete and save the changes. And now I'm gonna go ahead and delete the user and save the changes. So voila. So it looks now Richard is deleted off the database. Let's go ahead and go into my database and run another query. And as you guys can see here, Richard, it's now gone. All right, let me close some of these pages. Now the next item I want to show you guys is how to do join queries using entity. So join query. Let's just say if I want to know what's the name of the permission for each user, right? Like if a user is an admin or a user, regular user, right? So right now we have users, you have the user table, we have the permission table, user permissions, and you have the permission tables. So in order to do a join, we're going to do var result, and we are going to do we're going to create a query from us and user permissions. I'm already pulling user permissions up here, but you could technically just use this. From user permissions, join p in permissions on us dot permission id equals p dot id. So this is basically this is how you do a joined select query on using entity. Now we need to select, we can select just the permissions, or we can select just the user permissions. But on this, we don't want that. We want to create a new object that's gonna have user permissions. Oops. User permissions. It's going to be equals us. Permission, it's gonna be p And user, it's going to be equals user permissions. No, it's going to be US dot user. All right, let's go ahead and close it. You can actually put in a list if you want. Dot to list. So basically, we're gonna get the user permission, and the permissions all on the same line record for this join. Let's go ahead and run it so you guys can see what it looks like. All right, let's run it and let's see what it looks like. All right, we got 3 results. We got 3 records in the database because we deleted Richard. Now let's see what it looks like. So on the first record, we got a permission item. And on the permission item, I have the ID and the name. I have the user, and the user is going to be Mac with his email and his other properties. And we also have his user permissions. On this case, there's not really a reason to include user permission here because we already have the permission name and the ID, and we already have the user. So let's look at the second one. Second one got the permission, which is a user, and the user, which is John, and also the user permission. And final, we got the user, Mary Jo, and her user permission. So the joins are pretty straightforward. They could get complicated. There's other things you can do. But for the sake of this tutorial, that's all I'm going to show you. If you guys want more explanation or other videos on a bit more complicated joins, feel free to drop a comment below or send me a message. Thanks guys. Thanks for watching.